Have you ever sat in a room full of people, watching the conversation bounce from person to person like a hyperactive ping pong ball while you just listen? Or maybe you have noticed that one person in your friend group, classroom, or office who rarely speaks up, but when they finally do, everyone stops to listen. We live in a society that champions the loud. We are told that speaking up is the ultimate sign of confidence, intelligence, and leadership. But what about the people who rarely speak in groups? Are they simply shy? Are they secretly judging everyone else? Or is there something deeply complex happening behind that quiet exterior? Today, we are going to dive deep into the psychology of people who rarely speak in group settings. We will unpack the neurological differences in their brains, the hidden social dynamics they are navigating, and why their silence is often their greatest, most misunderstood strength. If you are that quiet person, this is for you. And if you are the extrovert who always wonders what the quiet person is thinking, pay very close attention. Let us start with the hardwiring of the brain, because for many people who rarely speak in groups, their silence is not a conscious choice. It is a physiological baseline. In the realm of psychology and neuroscience, the distinction between introverts and extroverts is the first place we look. It comes down to how your brain responds to neurotransmitters. Extroverts have a brain pathway that heavily rewards dopamine. Dopamine is the feel-good chemical released when we seek novelty, take risks, and engage in highly stimulating social interactions. For an extrovert, a lively, loud group conversation is a dopamine buffet. It energizes them, making them want to talk more, interrupt, and share their ideas immediately. But the naturally quiet person's brain works entirely differently. Their brains are highly sensitive to dopamine. Too much of it, like the sheer amount generated in a fast-paced group setting, does not feel good. It feels exhausting. It leads to severe overstimulation. Instead, the quiet person's brain relies more heavily on a different neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is tied to deep thought, reflection, and focused attention. It is the chemical that makes us feel good when we turn inward, when we read, think deeply, or have a quiet, meaningful one-on-one conversation. So, when a quiet person is sitting in a group of 6 or 7 people, their brain is not seeking the dopamine rush of jumping into the fray. Their brain is processing the environment through an acetylcholine pathway. They are internally reflecting on what is being said. Their silence is not a lack of engagement. It is a highly active form of neurological processing. They are wired to think before they speak, whereas the extrovert is often wired to think by speaking. This brings us to the concept of the social battery and sensory overload. Many people who rarely speak in groups fall into the category of highly sensitive people. This means that their central nervous system is simply more sensitive to physical and emotional stimuli. When deeply introverted or highly sensitive people enter a group setting, they are not just hearing the words being spoken. They are absorbing the tone of voice, the body language, the micro-expressions of everyone in the room, the background noise, the lighting, and the shifting social dynamics. It is an immense amount of data to process. Think of their brain like a computer with 20 tabs open, trying to download massive files all at once. If they were to actively participate and talk over everyone else, their system would effectively crash. So, to manage this intense cognitive load, they conserve their energy. They go into a psychological power-saving mode. They listen, they observe. By staying quiet, they are regulating their nervous system and protecting their social battery from draining too quickly. If you see someone sitting quietly in a group, you might assume they are bored or disengaged. In reality, they are often the most dialed-in person in the room. They are hyper-aware of the shifting moods, who is dominating the conversation, who feels left out, and the underlying tensions that the louder people are completely oblivious to. Their silence is a protective mechanism, allowing them to remain in the group without becoming completely overwhelmed. But we have to be grounded in reality here. Not all silence is born from a healthy place of quiet reflection. Sometimes, people rarely speak in groups because they are trapped in a psychological cage of perfectionism and social anxiety. This is a vital distinction to make. For some, the silence is driven by the spotlight effect, a cognitive bias where we believe that people are paying much more attention to us than they actually are. In a group setting, the socially anxious person feels like they are standing under a glaring interrogator's lamp. When a topic comes up, they might have a fantastic thought, a funny joke, or a brilliant solution to a problem. But before they open their mouth, their brain runs a rapid-fire risk assessment. What if my voice cracks? What if I stumble over my words? What if someone disagrees with me? What if I sound stupid? They hold their words hostage to an impossible standard of perfection. They believe that unless what they have to say is an absolute, undeniable masterpiece of human communication, it is better to say nothing at all. This is deeply tied to rejection-sensitive dysphoria, an extreme emotional sensitivity to perceived criticism or rejection. In a group, the variable of rejection multiplies. It is not just one person who might disagree with you. It is 5, 10, or 20. The quiet person calculates that the risk of speaking and facing potential embarrassment far outweighs the reward of sharing their thought. Over time, this becomes a reinforced behavioral loop. The longer they stay quiet, the harder it becomes to break the ice. They become labeled as the quiet one by the group, and eventually they internalize that identity, feeling like they are no longer allowed to speak even if they desperately want to. Now, let us look at the cognitive style of the analytical observer. In Western cultures, we have a heavy bias towards speed. We equate the speed of a response with intelligence. If someone asks a question and you immediately fire back an answer, you are seen as sharp and quick-witted. But quick does not always mean correct, and loud does not always mean right. People who rarely speak in groups are often operating on a completely different cognitive timeline. They are the analytical observers. When a topic is thrown onto the table, the loud participants will start batting it around immediately, often forming their opinions in real time as they talk. The analytical observer takes a completely different approach. They take the information, pull it inside, and examine it from multiple angles. They are looking for patterns. They are cross-referencing what is being said right now with something someone else said 20 minutes ago. They are silently identifying the logical fallacies in the arguments being thrown around. By the time they have synthesized all this information and formed a well-thought-out, deeply insightful conclusion, the fast-paced group has already moved on to 3 different topics. This creates a deeply frustrating reality for the quiet person. They often feel outpaced by the sheer velocity of group conversation. It is not that they have nothing to say, it is that the window of opportunity to say it opens and closes in a fraction of a second. However, this analytical nature gives them a distinct advantage. Because they are not busy trying to dominate the airwaves, they are practicing active, deep listening. And when they do finally decide to speak, their words carry immense weight. There is a psychological phenomenon where scarcity creates value. Because they speak so rarely, their words are viewed as a scarce resource. When the quiet person leans forward and opens their mouth, the group instinctively quiets down. They know that whatever is about to be said has been carefully curated, vetted, and polished. Finally, we cannot ignore the impact of environment and power dynamics on a person's willingness to speak. Human beings are deeply tribal creatures, and whenever a group forms, an invisible hierarchy is immediately established. The psychology of people who rarely speak is heavily influenced by how they perceive their place within this hierarchy. In many groups, there is a conversational monopoly. 1 or 2 dominant personalities suck the oxygen out of the room. They are the chronic interrupters, the overtalkers, the people who treat every silence not as a moment to breathe, but as a vacuum they must immediately fill with the sound of their own voice. For someone who is naturally quiet or highly empathetic, fighting for conversational space feels aggressive, exhausting, and completely unnatural. They simply refuse to play the draining game of who can shout the loudest. Furthermore, psychological safety plays a massive role here. If a person feels that the group culture is judgmental, highly competitive, or prone to mockery, their natural survival instinct will be to retreat. Why would they offer up a vulnerable piece of their inner world to a group that has not proven themselves trustworthy? The quiet person is often acting as a social barometer. Their silence is a highly accurate read on the psychological safety of the room. If you are a leader, a teacher, or just a friend hosting a dinner party and you notice someone is completely silent, the absolute worst thing you can do is to put them on the spot by asking in front of everyone, "Why are you so quiet?" This only makes them feel alienated and scrutinized. Instead, create space. Ask for their opinion directly but gently. Validate their input when they do share. When you create an environment where people do not have to fight tooth and nail to be heard, you will be amazed at the profound, complex things the quiet people have to say. To wrap this up, being the person who rarely speaks in groups is not a character flaw. It is not a deficit that needs to be urgently fixed. Whether it is rooted in the neurochemistry of introversion, the energy conservation of a highly sensitive nervous system, or the deep analytical processing of a strategic mind, your silence serves a profound purpose. Yes, if your silence is driven by crippling social anxiety and the fear of judgment, that is a barrier worth gently dismantling. You deserve to let your voice be heard without the heavy weight of perfectionism crushing you. But if you are quiet simply because you are listening, observing, and thinking deeply, do not let a loud world convince you that you are doing something wrong. Society needs the listeners just as much as it needs the speakers. We need the deep processors, the social barometers, and the careful observers. The next time you find yourself sitting quietly in a group, while the conversation swirls around you in a chaotic blur, take a deep breath. Recognize the absolute power in your stillness. Your silence is not an absence of thought. It is the presence of deep, focused awareness. And when you are finally ready to speak, the world will listen.